and welcome to the Fall 2019 Rikard Lecture. My name is Lynn Goody, and I have the honor of serving as the Mackay Rikard Chair of Business and Economics. The Rikard Lecture Series, established in 1991, is named after Mackay Rikard, a Noblethorpe alumnus, Athletic Hall of Fame member, and trustee emeritus. Mr. Rikard, who passed away in 1996, was the former president of Allied Products Company and a supporter of Oglethorpe athletics and student scholarships. I would like to acknowledge the other members of the Rikard Lecture Committee who helped organize and arrange this event. Dr. Seema Shakande, just wave. Ms. Barb Henry, and Dr. Peter Cower. Our distinguished guest lecturer, Mr. Christian Fischer, went to college in Germany and is fluent, unlike me, in German, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. He began his career at Georgia Pacific in 1989 as a sales manager. In 1992, he relocated to Atlanta, becoming group president of packaging in 2006. For 10 years, he served as executive vice president of packaging and named president and CEO in 2017. He is a member of the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and recently joined the Board of Counselors for the Carter Center. Mr. Fischer also serves as the vice chair of the Atlantic International School Board. A little background on his company. Georgia Pacific, a unit of Koch Industries, is in the forest and paper products industry. They are the world's leading makers of tissue, pulp, paper, packaging, and building products. Many of us touch at least one, hopefully more, of their products each day, such as Dixie cups, writing paper towels, and Quilted Northern. Earlier this year, on behalf of Georgia Pacific, Mr. Fischer accepted the 2019 Power to Inspire Award given annually by the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Georgia Pacific partnered with the International Human Trafficking Institute in a 3-year campaign to raise awareness of this important issue, specifically in Atlanta and specifically around the 2019 Super Bowl. For the next 30 to 35 minutes, Dr. Schall requires no introduction. And Mr. Fischer will have a conversation on global leadership, a topic for which he is well suited and uniquely qualified. Please welcome Mr. Christian Fischer and Dr. Larry Schall.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cousin Center. Wonderful to have you all here. Christian and I got to know each other through Coach Aiken, who's sitting in the back. He's a terrific soccer player. His kids are better than he is, so we get to play occasionally. And so when I asked Christian if he'd come and talk to us all about leadership and his company, he was happy to do it as long as he didn't have to give a lecture. Yeah. So we're just going to have a conversation and then we will open it up. So Christian, we heard a little bit about Georgia Pacific. We know it's a big company located down on Peachtree Road. Tell us a little more about it.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy that we already got the advertisement on a couple of the brands out, so I can do this very lightly here. So Georgia Pacific's been around for almost 100 years. Started in Augusta, Georgia, went out west for a while. That was prior to my time. I came here sometimes in the back here, sometimes early 80s, I think. And again, almost 100 years. In 2005, we were taken private. We started as a private company. We went public in 2005. Again, we were reverted back to becoming a private company. We were purchased by Koch Industries. So 2 gentlemen owned the majority stakes in that company and have been private ever since. We're about $20 billion worth in revenue. And, you know, for simplicity, you could say it's about a third building products, a third consumer products, a third cellulose and packaging where I started my career. And we have about probably 35,000 employees, 150 factories around the country. It's primarily US based, not in commerce, but in terms of manufacturing activity. Got a couple of plants in South America, but our manufacturing, other than that, is all here. But we do business with any country that, you know, the United States allow you to do business with. So Yeah, there's a couple of comments there.
So, it's interesting. So your production is largely U.S. based. Now you hear today, you know, a lot about, you know, if you listen to the news, a lot about manufacturing having moved out of the country and offshore. Has it been an intentional decision for the company to keep U.S. based? An economic decision? I mean, how is it that you have so much? You're producing so much here.
Well, so it depends on which question I answer. It's a little bit of yes or no. We actually at Koch Industries we are broadly international. So there is actually not a philosophical or some sort of economic reason for Georgia Pacific not to be offshore. Until 2000 and let's call it 2010, something like that. We actually had a lot of consumer products production in Europe. There was just one problem. We just couldn't find a way to make any money. So we sold it. So there is actually not a reason not to be there other than it's not that easy to go from a very small, almost non-existent basis to a basis that makes difference, right? If you buy stuff, you know, a company, a production site that is just small, you start thinking, well, it makes no difference and the opportunity cost is huge. If you buy something huge and you say, well, I haven't had anything there for a long time, it's a different risk profile. I'm not saying that you wouldn't do either or, but so far there's really not been that interesting an opportunity for us, but we're actually always looking.
And do you have a single main competitor? Or, I mean, you're in different businesses. Who's your competition and where are they from?
Most of well, on a global basis, and we export to a lot of countries, right? The list goes on and on. So you'd say the world is your competitor, right? And depending on the product, the answer is different. Back here on shore, if you will, there's a lot of the big names some of you may have heard, and if you haven't, don't look them up. International Paper Packaging Corporation of America. I'm sure you've heard about Procter & Gamble. You've heard about Kimberly-Clark. You know, so those are some of the bigger household names, if you will, that you may have heard about. Interestingly enough, we do business with these competitors. So you produce something in a place that they don't, and you trade, or they produce something that you don't produce in another place, but you need it, and you buy from them. So it's interesting. I mean, one division might be, you know, might hate them or respect them as a competitor. The other loves them as a supplier or a customer. Yeah. So
interesting. So tell us about how your start into the business. How old were you? What was your first job? How'd you get the job?
Okay. Well, it is. So let me quickly back up. So I was born in Germany, lived there until 10, and then moved to Brazil. So I quickly had to pick up Portuguese. When it was time to decide when I had finished high school in Brazil, I said to myself that I'm going back to Germany for a very simple reason. I'm going to study German literature. And I lasted for one class. And I said, this is not me. So I quickly changed over to American literature, philosophy, and good stuff like that. Good income producing kind of career. And in the meantime, I had to pay for, not college, but cost of living, right? Because in Germany, college pretty much was taken care of through tax, by the government or taxpayer benevolence, however you want to look at it. So that took care of the student fees, but not of the cost of living. So I needed a job. The first job I applied to was a supermarket to restack boxes. But they said, did you have any previous experience? I didn't, so I didn't qualify. The second, actually, an uncle of mine from Brazil had said, look, if you go to Hamburg, Berlin, or Munich, I got a few friends there. I don't know where you'll end up. I don't know what you're going to look for. But if you need them, any kind of help, at least somebody to call. Here's a couple of envelopes. Look them up. Well, I stayed in Hamburg, because that's where I find my admission to the college. And after I was rejected from the supermarket, I pulled out the envelope. It was closed. I showed up there, and it happened to be a a small sales office for a Brazilian pulp producer. And on that day, it was 4 people. On that day, the person that interacted a lot with the Brazilian headquarters, did a lot of the office clerical work, she had just left the company. So they needed some help. And I had no prior experience in anything except the language and the envelope. And somehow I had a good interview, I guess. And the guy said, let's give it a try. And, I got into pulp and paper, and I'm still in pulp and paper. Yeah, it's just
Funny how that works out.
Yeah.
So, what year was that?
That would have been 1984, 5, something like that. I was about 19 or 20.
Okay. Somebody do the math, how many years ago was that?
Yeah, 55 today.
Yeah.
Only for the economists around here. I mean,
So there's a 30-year run. So, how do you get from selling pulp, 1 or 4 people in a small office in Hamburg, to running a company?
Not in a straight line, let me tell you. And not purposeful either, Larry, because I did this half-day job thing for 5 years, almost 5 years with the Brazilian company, and I studied, but my study kind of the number of hours it took started to go down and the work started to go up, but I was refusing to do one or the other. So I did the dual thing for quite some time, and it was sort of funny that, in college they looked at me like, he's kind of a weird guy coming to these literature courses and all that, but he's semi-dressed as a business guy. In the business world, they were saying he's kind of sloppily dressed, he's really not from here. And you go through all that. It took the longest time. There was a time, though, 5 years into it, when I was actually running this office. Because the leaders had left, they said, would you want to do it? I said, no, I'm not interested for the reasons I just explained. And finally I said yes, because I was spending the hours anyway, so I might as well try to make some money, right? And I said, as long as you let me continue my studies. And that happened, but then year 5 came around, and a few things had happened. 1, I had no girlfriend. 2,
You had no girlfriend?
at that time, yes. Important factor. I was bored, and I felt I was being taken advantage of because I was de facto now running this office, but being paid way less than the experienced people with a degree or something like that. And then one day I got through a common acquaintance. I got a call. Hey, Georgia Pacific is looking for somebody who knows how to sell pulp. It's just in a different city in Germany. Would you be interested? Again, no girlfriend, bored, underpaid. I said, why not? Well, and they hired me, right? Good sales job, trying to promote myself as a sales guy, and I got into that. And then 3 years later, they said, well, would you want to come to Atlanta and sell in South America? And I said, well, that sounds pretty good. My wife and I decided to come.
You had a girlfriend at that point?
But I was really close, and we quickly got married before we came here. Yeah, so that took care of that. And somehow there's 27 years in this town, the American lifestyle, a garage full of junk, a mountain of debt, too many cars, all that good stuff. And still a way where I would just say, things just one led to another. I don't think that I really thought about quote-unquote a career per se until I probably was in my mid-40s there. And then a bunch of things happened in terms of when Coke Industry bought the company. And, what typically happens then is the takeover occurs. Some people make a lot of money, I was not one of them, through the shares they have, right? They all vest, they get cashed out and say, I don't need to work anymore. Second are those that say, no, I don't want to work for these new owners. That happens. And the third one is the owner said, no, I don't want those to work here. And I was left. And I went like 3 jumps in like one swift move, and they gave me a chance, right? And that was for my previous role. And then a couple of years ago, they just said, hey, some other things are being reorganized, and would you mind being CEO? I didn't have to think about that too long. And I don't know, it's really not a straight line. It's a line full of stops and goes, but the more interesting for that, I think.
So when you listen to this story, you'd say, it was, a little bit of being in the right place at the right time, a little bit with, accepting opportunity when it came. Is there, would you say that there are a few things that people recognized you for that allowed you to continue to be offered opportunity? Is there?
The short answer is yes. I think all of that plays a big role, right? Luck, being in the right place, right time, all these things. Doing a few things the right way, having the right attitude, etc. But along the way, you need a bunch of people that notice, that care, and ultimately give you an opportunity, right? And an opportunity usually comes, I think, with one price tag attached to it. It's probably somehow or other a stretch for you. I mean, otherwise you'd be doing more of the same, right? And so people are willing to take a bet with you on your behalf, and without that, it wouldn't have happened.
Do you have, people often talk about the role of mentors. You look back over your career, would you say that there was a person or two that looked over your shoulder and took care of you?
Yes and no. I mean, if I think about mentor and I think about, well, mentor certainly would include something like, I guess, elements of, well, trust, element of, I don't know, teaching, helping you think, grow, learn, etc. And maybe includes in a more classical sense also somebody that has more experience in one area than yourself. I would say yes, but not so much in a structured way, Larry, so that, we would say, hey, let's get together every Thursday and talk through stuff, etc. No, I think it was more either on the job, through, your respective bosses most of the time. But the other thing, too, is I think there's actually many more people out there, and so they were in my life, too, that somehow care about you, or somehow care to give you a piece of advice, or that somehow you can approach when you have a problem or just need to think something through. And they don't need to be dedicated or just exclusively available for you or that structured, and I got a ton of that. And that's tremendously useful.
I had the opportunity to go to a presentation the other day by students in here who had done internships, and they were doing presentations on their internships. And then when you talk to young people today, one of the things I often hear is that they're looking for a job that would give them work-life balance, which was not a phrase I grew up with. You just had the two boys, or you have other?
Two boys.
You just had the boys.
Yes,
Two boys. Okay.
Yes.
And so you and your wife were raising those two boys here, and what's and I guess you see a lot of young people who are coming into the company today. You have thoughts about this sort of work-life balance idea?
Yes. Well, first of all, my thoughts go back to I once was at a few years ago at I forget what meeting it was. It was basically in London at Unilever. I think you know that brand. And the CEO was talking, and somebody asked him a similar question, and he said, "Who told you that even existed? And who told you that anybody was entitled to work-life balance?" I said, "I don't know what it is, so therefore I can come." Okay, it was a little facetious, right, to drive home. But I would answer the question with that. To some extent, I think he's right. I don't know what that is either. First of all, I think it makes a separation between work and life, which is kind of, last time I checked, when I go to work, I'm still living, right? So, but the other thing is, I think everyone's different. And I think everyone needs to figure out how they tick, what's important to them, also how the people around them that care about them tick. I'll give you one story. At the beginning of my career here, in Atlanta, I was responsible for. It became worldwide sales of pulp, and 70% of that found its way to exports. I made frequent flyer miles like crazy. I was never at home. I was always jet lagged. I was always on the way to somewhere or from somewhere. There was a day that I think I had just carelessly dropped my shoes or a bag in the front parlor of the house. And I just went to pick it up and put it in the right place. And my oldest son, the one that you know here, he looked at me. He must have been maybe 10 or so. He looked, "Dad, are you leaving again?" I just said, wow. I mean, just because I'm moving a bag around. I screwed up a lot of things with around the boys when they were growing up, because I basically didn't see them until 10. Fortunately, they seem to have forgiven me.
They do seem to have forgiven you.
Somehow. I tried to do better with the girls. I think I've done better with the girls. But so much depends on you and how you learn, on what works for you, etc. And as time change, and also how we do work nowadays, I think that changes, right? I mean, look, I don't know that at the 10, 15 years ago, I could have said, look, I'll skirt out the office at 3:30 so I can come to Oglethorpe and have a conversation here, right? Now, hopefully, we get about 100 applications from you folks for jobs at Georgia Pacific next year, and from colleagues of yours. But other than that, I mean, times change, you really got to figure out what makes sense for you. And if that's what you call work-life balance, well, then it's a tough act. And I don't know if anybody ever gets it right, quite frankly.
So do you, when you have young people come in, sort of entry-level jobs, could be an accounting job, could be sales job, in your position, do you have a chance to rub shoulders with them these days, or not so much?
I do. I get called to something similar like this all the time, right? So you got your, I don't know, the 100 young or new engineers, right? Or the new interns, or the co-ops, or all of the above, right? In different sessions all the time, yes. And so I spend an hour with them like I do here, and one goes through, I don't know, a couple of topics they're interested in, or mostly Q&A and interacts. I get a chance, which is very exciting too, in a smaller environment, when co-ops come and they are, they've been there for a while, and then they talk about some of the projects that they're working on. That is fun. They got a couple of minutes and they talk about it as they introduce themselves. That is really, really exciting. And it's amazing what some of these young folks without any experience, proper, actually figure out very fast and how they can contribute to our business.
Good. Is there a common mistake you see young people coming out of college or graduate school sort of make in terms of their approach to work? I cannot talk, and I have not heard of common mistakes. Some of the mistakes that I made, and I'm sure you may have made some in the same category, is even if you don't get to make the decisions, and it's not specifically related to work only, is probably mistaken or overvaluing skill, knowledge, aptitude versus, let's call it character. For a second, I made a lot of mistakes. I had somebody develop a market for me when I was young that I knew very quickly they were corrupt. They tried to corrupt me. I said, well, there's no harm they can come for the company or for anybody else, right? I'm not corrupt. I'm not going to take a bribe, and I can control it. Well, that leads to the second one, right? The humility to think that you can actually control such things. You can't control bad character, let me tell you that. So that cost the company a lot of money and me a lot of aggravation. It's just one story that I'll never forget. So I think that in just dealing with people, I mean, maybe not surrounding ourselves with the right character, quite frankly, or integrity, whatever you want to choose. Two is
look, I'm impressed by what young people today know at their stages of life versus what I think we know. Blown away, right? Hopefully you are not blown away by that, by drinking your own Kool-Aid. I think that's very, very dangerous. And that's oftentimes, something that I see people think they know too much too early. And I think the third one is, taking success, early success, as a measure of how good you really are. I mean, our owner says the same thing. I wish your first project, job, task, whatever you want to call it, really fails. Because you learn from it. Probably you haven't destroyed too much value, but the learnings from that will prevent you from making many more bigger mistakes later on. I think those are more like lookouts, rather than I see them all the time.
Right. Good. A big global company, international company. What are there different kinds of skills that a global company looks for than a company that was, smaller and just focused in the States when you were looking to hire someone? Or does it matter to you whether they spend a semester abroad? Does it matter to you if they speak a second language?
So, I think we are in a transition today, and I think I'm probably trying to push the company more in a direction that the company wants to embrace, but practice is slow to follow. So, what do I mean by that? I think we are still suffering from too much of a syndrome or approach to things where we actually have what we would call a job description and with requirements. And then you say, well, where did the requirements, for example, come from? You could really ask the question like, bachelor plus 5 years of this and that. And you can challenge anyone and say, there, how'd you come up with that 5-year thing? Well, you know what this is? It's really just a drive for efficiency. Because you get a pile of 100 applications and you want to put 50 to the left and 50 to the right. How do you do that? Well, put 5 years in there. So you put the ones over here and over there. All right. It tells you nothing about the person, or very little, at least. And I think we're still practicing many of these things, although we have it in our guiding principles, the recognition, and our business philosophy, and we can talk about that as much as you want later on. But that everyone is different. Everyone brings different skills to it. They actually have different skills. Everyone has different skills that shine at different times. We are all so very complex that if you just use some standard average type of requirement in there, you're going to make bad selections. You might as well just throw darts, quite frankly. And they're in the name of efficiency, not in terms of getting the best candidate. We have a lot to learn around that. Having said that, I think we're making progress just by recognizing that and by looking at that and by actually trying to do what we would describe as, we look at 70% values and beliefs and 30% skills. Thinking that, if you got the right, right attitude, the right values that fit with us, that's more important and that's harder to build. The knowledge we can teach, you can learn, experience will come.
Good, interesting. All right, so final question. We talked about values. Mm-hmm. So Georgia Pacific, 100-year-old company, Georgia-based, Atlanta-based. Everyone, here knew it as this sort of homegrown local company like Coca-Cola, Georgia Pacific. Then you get acquired by a monolith, big company with and Coke Industries has a particular, people have a particular view of the brothers. And so what was it like, having worked for that company for so long, to be acquired? Is there a different set of values that they try to bring? You said there were people there that go, I didn't want to stay. What is it like to be part of an acquisition?
Yeah, well, I'll round out again, we're private, right? And that private company, Coke Industries, has been around for approximately the same time. And Charles Koch, who is the owner, and has been the CEO since the 50s of Coke Industries. He's a very deep and broad thinker, so he developed his own business philosophy. He's written books about it, etc., etc. And they're based on a lot of studies from economy to pretty much all the sciences you have here, and he's a chemical engineer and all that. Okay, so he didn't just invent it all, is my point. But he also created this own set of guiding principles that actually describe the culture that we want to aspire to as a company. And when we think about values, I mean, I think, and if you can connect them to culture, then I think the conversation becomes a little bit smoother. So whenever you have, I think, an individual owner or private owner who might be a founder and a CEO, owner, then it's more easy to kind of say, okay, they may very well put their own imprint, if you will. This is how my company is supposed to work, and as long as I'm around, right?
It's their company.
It's their company. And he did that. And ours is called market-based management, right? We have what we call now 8 guiding principles, and they start with integrity, stewardship, and compliance. Then they go into principled entrepreneurship. We can explain some of this transformation. And but a lot of that, the rest is also how work is to be done, right? I mean, again, with integrity, respecting the rights of others, respecting laws that are written there and not budging on that. Humility, respect, knowledge. And the last principle is the one that we touched on a little bit before, self-actualization. It's not necessarily a word that is kind of very, widely used in business terms, right? But self-actualization, realizing everyone's different, and I get to actually create an environment where everybody can become different. When that philosophy came, it sounded pretty much like you might think about, well, that's what we talk about at home, that's how I'm growing up, that's what my parents taught me, etc. Well, I thought so too, and then I had a crisis for about 4 months, because to actually practice it and really live it, it's not that easy. But if you, as a company, want to aspire and create this type of culture, it's really hard work. It's not just words on a wall. And I want to be careful here not to kind of distinguish this in, hey, that's private versus a public company, or that's us versus anybody else. I can just say, in the old GP, where I was a pretty happy camper too, so I don't have any complaints per se, but it depended more on who was in charge. It depended more on who your boss was. If you worked on this department or on that one over there, it could actually kind of be different. Here we have one common philosophy, and whether I sit here or somebody else, they better live that. They'll have their own accent, their own little, strengths and weaknesses, but we try to live and aspire to live by the culture as defined by these guiding principles. In that sense, it's different. In my opinion, it's pretty unique.
Before we open it up, let me just let me talk about how you hire people, because there might be 1 or 2 people in the room thinking that. So we have job fairs where employers come. How do you end up finding people?
The same way. Job fairs. There's more word of mouth today. I mean, people say, this is a good company, I got it, I have someone. We encourage people that already work for us, if they know someone that could fit in well. I mean, that carries a lot more even than, I think, job fairs, but obviously you've got to do them. There's much more in the online community than ever before in terms of putting stuff out there. I'm alive on LinkedIn now. My people finally broke me down. They said, you gotta have it. You are a detriment to our hiring because you have no profile out there. So we'll see if that changes anything, but I'm alive and well on LinkedIn now too, okay? So, I don't know if that makes a difference. Let's see.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, but we go to military academies, we go to colleges, we go to job fairs.
You hire interns. You have an internship program.
Oh yes, we have internships. I think the number is, it's probably, I don't know if it's 200 to 400 a year or something.
That's a lot. Okay. Well, I'll make sure before I let you out of here, I'll get the name of your HR person and we'll connect it with our Center for Professional Development.
Yes.
And then how do you want to handle questions? Just going to take them? Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Lillian Norris. How would you describe your leadership style?
My own? Well, good question.
You should see him on the soccer field. It's mostly like just knock you over.
Well, the first thing I try to do is really say, what do I need to do as CEO with the highest responsibility to actually really live those values, right, that we value as I described, and do your very best. But then you got your own style, and if I feel good on a day, then I feel that I've listened 80% and talked 20% rather than the other way around, quite frankly. I think one thing that I have a reasonably easy time with is actually really dealing with different people that just are different, work differently, have different approaches. I thoroughly just enjoy that, so it comes easy, which means I get more, call it diverse talent on my table or connected with one another to get the work done. That matters to me. Two, I'm convinced is the right thing. And thirdly, it kind of works well for me, right? It's also more interesting. So those are a couple of things that I would say. And the other thing I would say is I try to have a sense of humor even in the darkest hours. I think that works well. It helps others, right? Takes some of the pressure off. Helps me too.
What else? Dr. Sharpman, looking for a job?
I guess I shouldn't publicly say that.
Chief Academic Officer.
Okay.
You're not going anywhere.
You mentioned a lot of the values, corporate values that you have at Georgia Pacific, and since being taken over by Coke, could you speak a little bit about how you personally feel and what your company does in terms of sustainability? I know your owners may have a different kind of theory on that.
Yes. So could everybody hear the question? Okay. So when we think about the role of a business in society, we kind of sum it up in the following. Make a product and services or both for whoever is your customer, right? And give them better alternatives than anybody else. That's what you should try. But you should do a second thing. You should do this, and you have to do this, consuming fewer resources. That's a mantra. If you don't do it, sooner or later you'll be out of business anyway. So inherent in that, well, the third one is, and then innovate constantly, because what's good enough today won't be good enough tomorrow. But the second piece is what, in my opinion, our opinion, has actually the real essence of sustainability in it. At least when it comes to, you should consume the fewest resources, so more resources can be left for future generations or for better use by society, right? And you can really translate that. I don't want to waste anything. I don't want to waste water. I don't want to pump things in the air, etc., etc. The second is when you go through our guiding principles, and you have a couple of concepts in there that really drive everything we say, and in no particular order. One of them is this concept of stewardship. It's not just compliance with the law, but stewardship, right? And when you think about stewardship, at the essence of stewardship, like on the environmental side, on dealing with people and keeping them from getting hurt, stewardship includes the profound right of others. And when you operate in a community, or you sell a product somewhere, or make a product and sell it, respecting the rights of others not to pollute, not to have a bad impact on the community and the people around that. Or, you make it all clean here, but wherever it goes, it's not good. No. These are things that are antithesis to everything we believe. When you look at the creating what we call virtuous cycles of mutual benefit. I know these are heavy words, but they drive us. We connect something with it, which means, look, it's always got to be of a mutual benefit for you and I, for our customer, and for our community and us. And we strive to be their preferred partner. When you really try to live by those principles, I think that is what sustainability is all about. Some people call it planet and all that kind of stuff. That's how we embody those principles in our actions. I feel as good about really living the essence of sustainability in our businesses as I ever have in private ownership.
Does your company have a set of goals, like to be, I don't know, carbon neutral or whatever,
When you talk about goals with us, without going into too many details, there's always a little difficulty we have for just picking a goal. What do you think about when I'm putting it out there? Why? Because we actually have a very deep philosophy that says, this is all about trade-offs. It can almost get you to any number, but what's the trade-off you pay on the other side? And you always got to think through that. So that doesn't mean that we say, hey, look, that we wouldn't say, look, I want to make more money next year than this year. That's a goal. Yes, absolutely. I want to have fewer accidents next year. It's a goal. So yes, but to just have a, call it numerical, absolute number out there, number or goal, we struggle a little bit with that, simply because it can be too one-dimensional, Larry, versus taking all things into a context. Having said that, a counter example of that, we are in many associations, industry associations, for example. So we are part of AFPA, American Forest Products Association. So, and we know that, speaking of our constituents out there, customers, consumers, people, they're interested in that. Well, what you doing? Do you have any goals, etc.? How do you think about that? So yeah, so every 10 years we kind of pick new goals, and while it's a little kind of strange for us, we participate there and we contribute to those. So for example, lower water consumption, lower accidents, reducing energy consumptions in mills and operations, etc. So we work on that, but we're always a little skeptical that you might be working on the wrong thing.
Any final question before we open up the reception? Right.
You're speaking to a room full of students of the liberal arts. You came from a liberal arts background. How did that help you as you progressed in your career?
It's funny, yeah. I mean, I was in a recent conversation with my head of HR, and she said, well, we might have to increase our recruiting in technical schools. I said, what about the liberal arts? She said, I don't know about liberal arts. I said, I'm liberal arts, so what do you think about it? Anyway, to your point. So, I think it may have helped in many aspects. I mean, when today I would just make a simple connection that a lot of the material, philosophical writers, authors, thinkers that Charles Koch goes back to, I read when I was in my 20s. I'm rereading them, right? It's a lot of the critical thinking, a lot of different perspective, a lot of argumentation, if you so will. It just gets your brain cells going. I would say, I don't know that I can make a strong case of that, but I like to read fiction, as you can probably guess at, right? Somehow fiction, I think, may on the margin help you with having some empathy and looking at different points of vision, taking interest in something that is not just you, and learning from them. Maybe that's helped. I don't know. I mean, other people would have to judge that. I wanna fancy that there was something that had helped along the way. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Christian for being with us.